3 years after my own sister stole my husband, they walked back through my parents' front door for what she called a family visit. Bethany hugged everyone but me, looked me up and down, and smiled. "Still single? LOL. She actually said the letters. Ryan, my ex, laughed from the doorway. "Hey, ugly. Still the same." And then my dad, who'd barely spoken above a murmur for 3 years, pushed back his chair and stood up. "Good timing," he said. "I have something important to tell you." Their expressions changed immediately. What happened in the next 40 minutes ended a medical career, rewrote a will, and forced me to make the hardest choice of my life. But the folder my dad set on that table? That still wasn't the part that broke me. To make sense of that dinner, I have to take you back 3 years. I was 31, married 4 years to Dr. Ryan Hayes, internal medicine, the kind of man who introduced himself with the doctor attached. I was working shifts at Green Creek Community Hospital, 36 hours a week, and I thought we were fine. Tired, but fine. Everyone's tired, right? Then one February night, my unit was overstaffed, and I got sent home early. Still in my scrubs, smelling like hand sanitizer and somebody else's bad news. Ryan was in the shower. His phone was on the kitchen counter, face up, and it lit while I was pouring cereal. I wasn't snoping. The banner did the snooping for me. A text from a contact saved with a little red heart. I knew the name before my eyes finished focusing. The way you know a diagnosis before the labs come back. It was Bethany, my sister. The message said she'd left her earrings in his car. And it said other things I won't repeat because my mother might hear this someday, and some sentences you can't unhear. Here's what I did. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone in the disposal, though I priced it out emotionally. I photographed the screen twice, checked the timestamps, and set the phone back down at the exact same angle. 12 years of nursing will do that to you. When something is bleeding, you don't panic. You document. Ryan came out toweling his hair and asked if there was coffee. And I said, "Yes, honey, there's coffee." I needed to be sure before I lit my life on fire. By morning, I was sure. But the affair, if you can believe it, was not the part that took 3 years to survive. My family's reaction was, I expected an earthquake. What I got was a family meeting with a casserole. My mother, Susan, sat me down at her kitchen table, held both my hands, and begged me not to make her choose between her daughters. "Don't put me in the middle, Ashley. I can't lose this family." She was 63 then, already misplacing words, and I didn't have the heart to tell her the family was already lost. It just hadn't hit the ground yet. Bethany never apologized. Not once, not sideways, not even in a card. The closest she came was a shrug over the phone. "These things happen. You two were basically roommates anyway." My dad said almost nothing, which at the time I read as weakness. Remember that. The divorce took 8 months. Ryan hired a lawyer with a firm handshake, and I walked away with my car, my license, my half of a mattress sale, and a lesson about which promises hold up in writing. 90 days after the ink dried, Bethany married him at a vineyard in Wisconsin. I found out from a cousin's phone at Christmas. 60 guests, white orchids, my sister in a dress the color of vanilla frosting. Then they moved to Denver, 5 hours away, and the whole town settled into treating it like weather. Something sad that happens. Nobody's fault. People at church squeezed my arm. So why did I stay in Green Creek, 10 minutes from the house where every holiday now had a crater in it? Not loyalty, not weakness either. I stayed because that fall my mother put the electric kettle in the refrigerator and laughed like it was a joke. And I was the only one in the room who knew it wasn't one. The diagnosis had actually come first, 6 months before the affair blew up, though we didn't understand yet what it would swallow. Alzheimer's disease at 63. Early enough that Mom could still recite the neurologist's diplomas back at him. Late enough that she'd been hiding sticky notes in her purse for a year. My dad, Arthur Peterson, spent 35 years as a general surgeon, and he responded the way surgeons respond. He made a plan with clean margins. He sold the lake cottage his own father had built, added most of their savings, and set aside $300,000 in a dedicated account. Mom's care fund, every dollar of her future in one place. And here's the part that still makes my jaw tighten. Ryan, golden son-in-law before the fall, helped him structure it, sat at that same dinner table with spreadsheets, patted my dad's shoulder, said, "You focus on Susan. Let us handle the paperwork." So, the account went joint. Dad's name and Bethany's, the eldest daughter, with everything routed through her tidy little system. It made sense at the time. I was pulling hospital shifts. She was good with logistics. Ryan was family. 6 months later, Ryan was in my sister's bed, and you'd think the arrangement would have been torn up with the wedding photos. It wasn't. Mom, still lucid enough to be dangerous, begged Dad to keep things whole. If we cut them off, I lose her. And my dad, the man who once fired a scrub tech for mislabeling a specimen, just nodded and left the names where they were. For 3 years, I told myself he was too heartbroken to fight. I have never been so wrong about a quiet man in my life. So, the machine settled into its shape. I did the hands. Bethany did the money. On paper, it sounded almost fair if you've never done the hands. My week ran like this. 3 12-hour shifts at Green Creek Community Hospital, every Tuesday at my parents' house, alternating weekends, plus every phone call that started with, "Ashley, your mother is asking for you." I managed her medication list, drove her to neurology, learned which shower rail she'd actually use, kept a whiteboard schedule on their kitchen wall, and, because charting is the one religion nursing gives you, I kept a care log, date, time, what happened, who was there. Habit, not suspicion. The fund, at first, bore no alarms. Requests went through Bethany's system, and reimbursements came back with smiley faces in the memo line. Then, near the end of that first year, I was sorting mail at the house and found a statement Dad had left out. One line item. Serene Steps Care Coordination, $2,400 for the month. I read it 3 times. I had been in that house 4 days that week. There was no Serene Steps, no badge, no binder, no van in the driveway, no coordinator calling me. And coordinators always call the nurse in the family. I brought it straight to my dad, statement in hand, finger on the line. He looked at it a long moment, then folded it in half. "I'll handle it," he said. The next month, the charge was there again. $2,600 this time. That night, I opened my care log and added a new column. And in it, I wrote one short line that would matter later. No aid present today. Let me tell you what 3 years actually looks like, because it isn't dramatic. It's Tuesdays. Tuesday was our day. Mine and Mom's. I'd come at 9 with cinnamon rolls from Miller's Bakery, and we'd sit at the kitchen table while I brushed out her hair, because buttons had gotten hard, but she still wanted to look nice. And there is a way a daughter learns her mother's scalp like a map. We did photo albums until the photo albums started upsetting her. Then we did birds at the feeder. Then we just did the brushing and the radio. Somewhere in year 2, she stopped reaching for my name. It didn't go all at once. It flickered like a bulb before it quits. One afternoon, she caught my hand mid-brush and studied me with those pale eyes and said, "You're the one who comes on Tuesdays. Not Ashley, not sweetheart. The one who comes on Tuesdays." People ask if that broke me, and I tell them the truth. It did the opposite. Her mind was letting go of every scoreboard she'd ever kept, names, weddings, who wore what, and the last thing it held on to was who showed up. Meanwhile, 5 hours away, my sister was documenting a different life. I wasn't following her, but small towns follow for you. Bethany on a boat in Santorini. Bethany at a gala for a charity nobody could name. Bethany in a white coat that wasn't hers, captioned, "Behind every great doctor." And that October, under a decade-old photo of our mother at the lake cottage, my sister posted a caption that nearly made me drive to Denver, "Missing my best friend, the cottage." The cottage that had been sold to pay for the care she was billing, though I didn't know that part yet. This January, the ceiling caved in. At 2 in the morning, my phone rang, and it was a Green Creek police officer with my mother in the back of his cruiser, wrapped in a blanket, mildly hypothermic, and asking politely if he could take her to the lake house. She had gotten up while my dad slept, dressed herself in a cardigan and one shoe, let herself out the back door, and walked almost a mile down Highway 7 in 20-degree air, looking for a cottage that had been sold 3.5 years ago. The ER kept her till morning. She was fine. Cold, scraped, singing to the nurses by 6. I was not fine. My dad was gray in a way I chalked up to the scare. He had the door chime people up by noon the next day. New locks, motion sensor on the back porch. Say what you want about surgeons. They don't make the same mistake twice. But her neurologist sat us both down that week and said the word we'd been outrunning, memory care. Not someday. Within the year, before the wandering finds a road with trucks on it. I did what I do. I made a spreadsheet, toured 4 facilities, and found exactly one that didn't smell like a hallway and sound like a television. Oakstone Manor, 20 minutes away, secured garden, staff who knelt to talk to residents, a music therapist who knew that a woman who's lost her words can still carry a tune. There was a room coming available on the memory wing, 2nd floor, window on a big old oak. Mom stood at that window during the tour and went still. The good kind of still. Oakstone Manor had 2 things though, a wait list and a price. Here is where I should tell you about my dad, because I was watching the wrong patient. All that winter he'd been strange, thinner, quieter, which for Arthur Peterson is saying something. And he'd started asking me questions with a weird precision, like a man taking inventory. On the 14th, were you at the house? Did anyone from an agency come? Maria works Mondays and Thursdays, never Fridays. Correct. Twice I walked into his study, and he slid papers into a drawer with the smoothness of a man palming a card. My honest fear, and I'm ashamed of it now, was that it was starting in him too, that I was about to have 2 patients and no parents. So, one night in February, I brought him tea, sat across the desk, and asked him straight, "Dad, the questions, the dates, the drawer, should I be worried about you?" He looked at me over his glasses for a long minute. My father has a face like a closed medical file. Then he said the sentence I grew up hearing every time he made me redo a school report. The sentence that used to mean nothing and was about to mean everything. A surgeon writes everything down. That was it. He picked his crossword back up like we'd been discussing the weather. 2 weeks later, the family group chat lit up with confetti emojis. Bethany, first message in almost a year that wasn't a thumbs up on someone else's photo. Big news. We're coming home next month for a visit. We miss you all so much, and we really need to talk about Mom. There was a heart on the end of it. My dad read that message at the kitchen table, and I watched him almost smile. I'm a nurse, so I read charts, and the internet is just a chart with worse handwriting. It took me one evening in a search bar to find out why my sister suddenly missed us all so much. Ryan was opening a clinic. Hayes Family Wellness, coming soon to a shiny address in the Denver suburbs. Membership medicine, unhurried appointments for discerning families. A website with a fountain on it. There was a glossy interview in some Business Weekly. Dr. Hayes and his wife, Bethany, a Green Creek native, believe care should feel like family. I actually laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen. It was the caption under the photo that stopped the laugh. Founding investors saw it. Which is business for. We need money. 3 days later, my phone rang with a Denver number I hadn't dialed since the divorce. Ryan's voice hadn't changed. Warm, unhurried, the voice that got him through every complaint review of his career. Ashley, good to hear you. Listen, we're coming down next month, and I think it's time we talked options for your mom. Your mom? For years at my family's table, and she had gone back to being your mom. He talked for 6 minutes, without one question mark aimed at her actual condition. What he did say twice was that the house was a lot for your dad to carry, and that tying up equity in an empty room never helps anyone. I gave him nothing but hums and wrote the whole call in my log afterward, time-stamped, out of pure habit. Then I sat there looking at the word I'd underlined. Options. When Ryan said options, he had never once in his life meant choices. He meant math. I just couldn't see yet whose column he planned to move my mother into. The Monday after that call, Oakstone Manor called me. The room with the oak tree was coming open, and their waitlist worked on deposits. $9,500 to hold it, $7,900 a month once she moved in. The director, a woman named Brenda with reading glasses on a beaded chain, slid the paperwork across and did not dress it up. Memory care is expensive because doing it right is expensive. Take it home. Do the math. I did the math in the parking lot because nurses don't wait for a desk. $7,900 a month is close to $95,000 a year. A terrifying number until you remember my dad had planned for exactly this. $300,000 set aside 4 years ago, minus what 3 years of AIDS and day programs reasonably cost. Mom's fund should have had well over $200,000 left in it. Enough for years at Oakstone Manor, with the house and Dad's pension behind it. For the first time in months, the numbers held me instead of the other way around. I sat in my car outside that building and let myself picture it. Mom by the oak window. Me visiting Tuesdays with cinnamon rolls. No more 2 a.m. phone calls that start with a police officer's voice. That evening I emailed Bethany. Subject line, Mom, Oakstone Manor deposit. Short and factual. The way you write anything you might someday need to show a judge. Room available. Deposit 9.5. Deadline in 3 weeks. Please confirm transfer from the care fund. I read it twice, sent it, and watched the little checkmark appear. It sat there. 1 day, 2 days. On day 3, my sister was posting brunch photos. On day 5, I got my answer, and I want to read it to you. Hey hun, just seeing this. Big decisions like this shouldn't be rushed over email. Let's all sit down as a family when we're there next month and really talk it through. Mom deserves that. Kisses to Daddy. There were 2 pink hearts. There was no yes, no no, and no $9,500. The room's deadline came before their visit, and she knew it because I had put the date in bold. So, I did what any reasonable person would do. I went around her. I drove to Green Creek Savings and Loan on my lunch break, still in scrubs, and asked what it would take to get the deposit released or my name added to the account so someone local could act in an emergency. The manager was kind and useless in the way policy makes people. I wasn't on the account. She couldn't discuss balances, activity, or so much as the font on the statements. Changes required both account holders, my father and my sister. Same day, signatures ID. Bring your dad in with Mrs. Hayes next month, she offered brightly, like that sentence didn't have a lit fuse in it. That night, I asked Dad flat out to add me. He was at his desk with his crossword, and he didn't look up right away. When he did, there was something in his face I mistook for tiredness. Not yet, he said. Trust me, a few more weeks. A few more weeks. From the man whose entire answer to a vanishing $2,400 a month had been, I'll handle it. I stood in his study doorway doing something I had never once done in my life. I ran out of patience with my father. Weeks until what, Dad? He filled in 7 across. Until they're sitting at my table. That Tuesday Mom surfaced. If you've loved someone with Alzheimer's, you know what I mean. Some afternoons, the fog just lifts, no reason, and the person walks out of it wanting tea. I was brushing her hair at the kitchen table, and she was suddenly entirely my mother, asking if I still worked nights, asking whether Miller's Bakery had raised their prices, which they had. Then she found the little mirror in the drawer and looked at herself a long time. I was never the beauty, she said. Matter of fact. My sister, Beatrice, was the beauty. Mama made that clear early so I'd know my job. Brush, brush. I kept my hands moving. Bethany was such a beautiful baby, she went on, dreamy now. People stopped me in the grocery store. A baby like that. You build the day around her. I used to tell you, didn't I? I used to tell you. Let your sister have the spotlight, honey. You're my capable one. You don't need it. I had heard those words 100 times growing up. Standing behind her with the brush, 40 years of our family suddenly read like one of those x-rays where the break has been there so long the bone healed crooked around it. My mother wasn't cruel. She was passing down the only arithmetic anyone had ever taught her. One girl gets seen, one girl gets useful, and both better be grateful. Bethany had been performing since before she could spell her own name, terrified of the day the audience left, and I had been earning since before I could spell mine, terrified of costing anything. I put the brush down and kissed the top of my mother's head, and she patted my arm and said, "You're a good one." Tuesdays, right? Ryan called again 10 days before the visit, and this time he dropped the warm-up act. He had reviewed Mom's chart remotely, he said, which was fascinating since he hadn't laid eyes on her in 3 years, and her neurologist had never heard of him. His professional opinion? Oakstone Manor was an emotional purchase. Boutique pricing, he said. Amenities nobody with her diagnosis can appreciate, he said. There was, he said, a perfectly adequate facility 40 minutes from Denver, half the cost, where the family could keep an eye on things. The family. And then when I listed what her neurologist actually recommended, staff ratios, secured outdoor access, the music program, he sighed, the sigh he used to aim at waiters, and delivered the line I want printed on his clinic's fountain. Ashley, you're a nurse, not a physician. You're too close to this. Someone objective needs to make the financial calls. Too close to this, 11 veneers of Tuesdays too close. I said evenly that we'd discuss it when everyone was in town, wrote the call into my log, time, duration, quotes, and hung up before my voice could spend what my face was saving. I was too close to this? I chewed on that phrase for hours, turning it over in my head like a bad lab result. But there was no time for rumination. That Friday was deposit day. I had Bethany's blessing by then. One line sent at midnight. Fine. Use the fund for the deposit if you must. If you must. Remember those words. Friday at 11 a.m. I walked into Oakstone Manor's front office, which always smells like coffee cake on purpose. Brenda had the paperwork fanned out. The room with the oak was mine to hold, and all that stood between my mother and the safest bed in the county was one wire transfer from her own care fund. Brenda typed, waited, then frowned at her screen in a way I've seen doctors frown at monitors. It's not going through, she said. Insufficient funds. I actually smiled. That's how sure I was. That account holds a couple $100,000, I told her. Run it again. She ran it again. Same answer. So, I called Green Creek Savings and Loan from the parking lot. And, because the transfer had failed, with me standing there as the named recipient's daughter holding power of nothing, the girl on the phone could tell me exactly one fact, the fact the machine had already told me. Available balance insufficient for a $9,500 transfer. Then quieter, because we'd gone to high school together, and she was bending a rule sideways. Ashley, there's not even close to that in there. Low four figures. Low four figures, out of $300,000, minus 3 years of real, accounted for care, there should have been somewhere north of $200,000 in that account. There was about $2,500. I stood in that parking lot for 1 minute doing absolutely nothing, which for me is a Category 5 event. Then I walked back inside, sat down across from Brenda, and slid over my own debit card, the one attached to 12 years of night differentials and skipped vacations. $9,500. My savings, minus a rounding error. Hold the room, I said. My mother is coming. Brenda looked at the card, then at me, and processed it without a word, which is the kindest thing anyone did for me that month. Somebody had emptied my mother's future. I had 3 weeks to learn who signed what, and my father. He had known for years. Here's what nobody tells you about Rage. Mine files paperwork. That weekend, my dad quietly, no questions asked, which should have told me everything, requested 3 full years of statements from Green Creek Savings and Loan. Account holders, right? For tax season. Tuesday night, after Mom was asleep, I spread them across my parents' kitchen table like a chart review and went line by line with a highlighter, exactly the way I was trained to hunt a medication error. It didn't take long, because the pattern wasn't hiding. Serene Steps Care Coordination, Respite Care, In-Home Assessment. $2,400 one month, $3,100 the next, $3,400 in the months. Bethany must have felt ambitious, dinging that account every single month. 21 months straight in total, a hair under $62,000. I cross-checked 11 of their invoiced respite days against my own care log, the one I'd been keeping out of habit since that first weird statement. 11 days when an aide was supposedly bathing and feeding my mother. 11 days when I was physically in that house, charting "No aide present today" in my own handwriting. There was no Serene Steps van, no Serene Steps badge, no Serene Steps human. There was only a filing 10 minutes on the Colorado Secretary of State website because LLC records are public, and thank God for that. Serene Steps Care LLC. Registered 4 months after the wedding. Managing member, Bethany Hayes. My sister had invented a company, named it something that sounds like a hospice brochure, and billed our mother's brain disease like a subscription service. And that was the small number. 8 months ago, outgoing transfer, $130,000. Memo line, conservative growth allocation. Last month, one final sweep, $14,500. The growth allocation had an address. It was Ryan's clinic. Wednesday, I paid $275 of my own money for 1 hour with an elder law attorney 2 towns over, because I wasn't ready to say any of this out loud in Green Creek. I laid out my folder, statements, my log, the LLC printout, and watched her eyebrows do a slow climb. This, she said, is one of the cleanest financial exploitation fact patterns I've ever seen walk in here. And you can't do a thing with it. I'm paraphrasing barely. Problem 1. I wasn't the account holder. So, legally, the injured parties were my parents. And any suit, any police report, any freeze, had to come from my father's hand, not mine. Problem 2. The moment the couple smelled trouble, one certified letter, one call from a detective, that last $2,500, and more importantly, any recoverable assets, Could slide into the clinic's business entities and take years of litigation to chase. Problem 3. The one that put ice in me. Criminal cases are slow. Charges, discovery, trial. 18 months if we sprinted, she said. And restitution, if it ever came, would come long after Oakstone Manor's next dozen invoices. Your mother needs the money back faster than the state can punish anyone. Civil pressure gets money. Prosecution gets headlines. I drove home the long way, past the lake where the cottage used to be ours. Doing the arithmetic that mattered. Every road ran through one man, the account holder, the injured party, the quiet man with the crossword who had watched a fake company eat his wife's future for 3 years and said, "I'll handle it." Either my father had been asleep at the wheel of his own life, or my father was doing something, and I had been standing outside of it. That night, I stopped waiting to be invited in. I built my case the only way I know how, like a shift report. Assessment. Findings. Recommendation. I printed the statements and flagged them with the little plastic tabs I use for med sheets. I copied out my care log, detailing by whom and what Mom needed by the first of the month. Then I sat in my car outside my own duplex for 10 minutes. Because there was one thing that could still stop me, and it wasn't fear of Bethany. It was my dad's gray winter face. The weight he wasn't explaining. If I put this folder in front of a 68-year-old man and his heart gave out at his own kitchen table, keeping the peace would be the last thing I had ever done for this family. I want you to know I sat with that for exactly 10 minutes. And then I thought about a police officer's voice saying she was asking for the lake house. "Ma'am." And I started the engine. It was almost 11 when I pulled up. The house was dark except for one light. His study, glowing yellow behind the curtain, like it had been every night that winter. I let myself in the back, past Mom's door alarm, and stood in the hallway with my folder against my chest like a shield. I could hear paper moving in there. A drawer. The particular squeak of his old chair. My father was awake at his desk at 11 at night, 3 days before my sister came home, as if he'd been waiting for me for 3 years. I knocked on the study door and he said, "It's open, Ashley," before I made a sound. He let me talk. 10 minutes, uninterrupted, my folder open on his desk, my voice doing the steady, clinical thing it does when the news is bad. Serene steps. The 11 days. The $130,000. Managing member, Bethany Hayes. When I finished, my father took off his glasses, cleaned them, and said, 61,900. Like a man correcting a residence chart. Their invoices drift upward in March. She got a bonus in March, back when she had a real employer. Old habits. Then he stood, took a key from his vest pocket, and unlocked the oak cabinet behind his desk, the one I'd assumed my whole life held tax returns and old journals. 3 shelves. Labeled folders, year by year. Copies of every statement, going back to their first month in Denver. Screenshots. Certified mail receipts. The Serene Steps LLC registration printed and dated years before my 10-minute internet discovery. A timeline in his surgical block print, cross-referenced. I saw my own name against the whiteboard schedule photos he'd apparently been taking of my care calendar for years. My red flags, the ones I'd handed him one at a time like a good girl, filed and annotated. "You knew," I said. "The 3rd month," he said. The first invoice looked wrong. The second confirmed it. After that, every month they billed, the record got heavier. Cut them off early, you save money and lose the proof. Let it run. Document everything. And he tapped the cabinet door. A surgeon writes everything down. I asked the only question left. "Why now, Dad? Why not last year?" And my father, who had been thin and gray and quiet all winter, sat back down and told me about the scan in November, and the second opinion in December, and the word pancreatic and what months, not years, does to a man's calendar. Then he almost smiled. Good timing. They're coming to us. The next morning, we drove to see Eleanor Vance, elder law attorney. A woman about 60, with a handshake like a door closing. It turned out I was the last person to join a surgery already in progress. The new will drafted. Mom's remaining scraps of money, already moved by Dad, the one signature Bethany couldn't block, into a fresh account with his name and mine. A demand package sat in a folder with Vance's letterhead. Repayment in full. Civil complaint ready behind it. Criminal referral behind that. Like instruments laid out in the order you'd reach for them. "We don't send anything," Vance said, "until they're in a room. Paper scatters people. Rooms concentrate them. The plan for the visit was simple. Let them come. Let them make their pitch. Whatever it was, Dad was betting on the house. And then he would stand up, and the folder would come out. And every path they might run down was already bricked over. I sat there nodding, taking my own notes, feeling for the first time in 3 years like the floor was load-bearing. And then my father turned away from Vance, looked at me over his glasses, and went off script. "When this is over," he said, "what do you want, Ashley?" I started to answer, and he held up a hand. "Not for your mother. I know what she needs. It's in the file. For you. What do you want?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. 34 years old. A woman who can tell you what every patient on a ward needs at 3 a.m. And the question, "What do you want?" hit me like a language I'd heard about but never learned. Eleanor Vance glanced up from her legal pad. My father just waited. He was still waiting when we left. The 2 weeks before they came were the longest of my life, and I spent them doing something I'm not proud of. Rehearsing. Not the plan. The plan needed nothing from me but a calm face. I mean, I lay awake drafting speeches for my sister. Little scalpel sentences polished nightly about vineyard weddings paid for out of what canceled Maria's Fridays. About missing my best friend posted under a photo of a cottage she'd helped liquidate. I'd fall asleep mid-edit and wake up sharpening a different one. Meanwhile, daytime Ashley kept the machine running. Shifts. Tuesdays. The brushing. Oakstone Manor's intake forms in triplicate. Brenda called to confirm move-in for the 5th of the month, and Mom, in a half-lucid moment, asked if the new place would have her oak tree, and I said yes. And she said, "Well, then." Here's the thing I finally admitted to myself somewhere around midnight number 9. And I'll admit it to you because this channel is where I tell the truth. I wasn't rehearsing for justice. Justice was handled. The folder. Vance. The bricked-over roads. I was rehearsing for the scoreboard. 3 years of still single LOL rattling around my head. And what I wanted, what I physically craved, was one public inning where I finally got to be the one holding it. Be honest with me, because I was honest with you. Would you have gone for the takedown, the speech, the audience, the whole flambé? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely read them. And subscribe if you're staying for this dinner, because you've earned a seat. Anyway, God has a sense of humor about rehearsals. The doorbell rang on a Friday, 24 hours ahead of schedule, and every speech I'd written went out of my head for good. They came early to catch us soft. I'm convinced of that now. Bethany swept in the way she enters every room, like the lighting had been waiting on her. Real estate hugs for everyone, the kind where only shoulders touch. When she got to me, she stepped back instead, took a slow inventory from my shoes to my ponytail, and smiled the smile that got her 3 county fair crowns. Still single, LOL, she said the letters out loud. At our mother's dining table. Ryan came in behind her, carrying wine nobody asked for. Surveyed the wallpaper, the worn runner on the stairs. Me. And laughed. "Hey, ugly." Still the same. To this day, I don't know if he meant the house or me. And I don't think he knew either. The sentence was load-bearing both ways. I said, "Hi, Bethany." "Ryan." "There's coffee," and my voice came out level, which I attribute to 12 years of saying, "The patient in room 4 is coding," in the same tone you'd order lunch. My hands did not shake. I want that on the record. And then came the moment none of us staged. Mom appeared in the hallway in her yellow cardigan, fresh from her nap, and stopped in front of this glamorous stranger. She studied Bethany's face the way she studies the bird feeder now, with polite wonder. Then she asked, "Are you the one who comes on Tuesdays?" You could hear the furnace tick. Bethany's smile held its shape while everything behind it left the building. "No, Mama, it's me. It's Bethany." Mom nodded, gracious as a queen with a stranger, and patted her arm. "Oh, Ashley comes on Tuesdays." And she shuffled past her firstborn to ask me if there were cinnamon rolls. My dad sat at the head of the table through all of it, silent, watching them the way he used to watch a monitor in recovery, waiting for a rhythm to declare itself. Dinner was pot roast and theater. Ryan waited until plates were cleared to produce, I kid you not, a leather portfolio. And the two of them performed what I can only call a duet. And I could hear the rehearsal in it, the way you hear it in a pharmaceutical ad. The house, Ryan explained, was a lot for a man Arthur's age. Markets being what they were, the smart move was to sell this year. Mom would transition to a well-run community outside Denver. He slid a brochure across. The cover photo was a beige hallway. Half the cost of these boutique places, and we'd be right there. And the proceeds, this was the AITA, would go into a family investment vehicle managed, he said humbly, through the clinic's fund, keeping everything in the family. Bethany came in on harmony. We've been managing the money 3 years, Daddy. We know what's best. And honestly, Ashley's amazing. A hand pressed to her chest aimed at me. But she's exhausted, and exhausted people make emotional decisions. I watched my father listen to all of it with his hands folded, nodding slowly. The picture of an old man being managed. Then he asked his questions. Gentle as gauze. Which community exactly? What's their overnight staff ratio? Do you know? Ryan didn't. And this vehicle, who audits it? Ryan said something with the word proprietary in it. One more. What does Serene Steps charge for coordination these days? Rates go up, I imagine. I stopped breathing. Bethany, radiant, fatally fluent, said, Oh, everything's gone up, Daddy. You have no idea. My father smiled for the first time all night. No, he said. I have some idea. And he folded his napkin the way he used to snap off surgical gloves. My father stood up, 68 years old, 30 pounds under his fighting weight, and the room still reorganized itself around him the way an operating room does. Good timing, he said. I have something important to tell you. Their expressions changed immediately. I finally understood that phrase, watching it happen. Not guilt yet. Recalibration. 2 people checking which version of themselves the next 5 minutes required. He set the folder on the table. Not a slam. A placement. The way you set down something sterile. 3 years of statements from your mother's care fund. Serene Steps Care Services. $61,900 for care nobody provided. 11 of those invoices billed for days when the only caregiver in this house was Ashley. Her log and my records agreed to the hour. The LLC behind Serene Steps was registered in Colorado 4 months after your wedding. He turned one page with one finger. Managing member, Bethany Hayes. My sister's face did something I had never seen it do. It stopped performing. 8 months ago, my father went on, voice level as a table, $130,000 left that account as a growth allocation. It landed in an entity attached to Hayes Family Wellness. Last month, another $14,500. What remained of Susan's fund as of Friday was $2,500. Roughly the cost of 1 month of the care you were invoicing. He looked at them the way he must have looked at 10,000 scans. You took more than $200,000 from a woman who can't always remember her own kitchen. You counted on nobody checking. You forgot whose daughter she is. A beat. A surgeon writes everything down. The furnace ticked twice. Then Ryan stood up so fast his chair barked against the floor, and his voice came out wearing an entirely new suit. Watch a cornered, credentialed man cycle through his settings. It's in education. Setting 1, technical. Management fees are standard practice. Care coordination is a recognized service category. You're reading raw statements without context. My father slid across a page of my care log, 11 highlighted days, and said, Here's context. Setting 2, sacrificial. Ryan took half a step sideways from his own wife. The LLC was Bethany's project. I assumed she was running actual services through it. If invoices were irregular, that's Bethany. My sister's head turned toward him slowly, like a door coming off one hinge. 20 years of being the prize, and the man she'd won was reissuing her as the defect. Setting 3, and he found it fast. The real Ryan voice, dropping into the register he probably thought of as courtroom. Think carefully, Arthur. You're dying to spend your last year on litigation? Push this, and I'll bury the estate. Competency challenges. Undue influence. Elder manipulation claims against her. A finger at me without eye contact. I know how these judges think. Susan will be in a county bed on Medicaid before you people see a dime. There it was. The brochure was gone. The beige hallway had always been the plan. Bethany made one last attempt at the old music. Daddy, this is all a misunderstanding. We would never, and my father looked at her with something so much worse than anger. Inventory. The will was re-executed last Tuesday, he said. Witnessed, notarized, filed with Eleanor Vance. Neither of you appears in it. The demand package is on her desk. Whether the next envelope is civil or criminal has not been decided. Ryan barked. By whom? And then my father did the one thing I never saw coming. He turned to me. I assembled the record, my father said to them, but looking at me. I'm the account holder, and I'll sign what needs signing, but I'm not the one who was robbed of a husband, and then billed for the privilege. And the smallest hitch, the only one all night. I won't be here for most of what comes next. So, it's Ashley's call. All of it. The lawsuit, the criminal referral, the medical board, what mercy looks like, if any is looked for. He tapped the folder and the will. Eleanor has my instructions. As written, everything goes to Ashley. If she wants it built differently, we build it differently while I'm still here to sign. The silence had texture. Bethany was staring at me, and I watched the exact second she understood the thing that had never once been true in our lives. Her little sister was holding the scoreboard. All of it. Her money. Her husband's license. Her name in this town. Ryan recalculated even faster. You could watch the flowchart run. And when he spoke, his voice had found a third setting I'd never heard. Careful, Ashley. We've known each other a long time. Whatever you're feeling, there are structured ways to resolve. 48 hours, I said. It came out in my 3 a.m. voice. The level 1. You'll hear from Eleanor Vance's office. Until then, nobody touches an account, and nobody calls my mother. I stood, collected the coffee cups nobody had touched, and carried them to the kitchen, because my hands wanted a job, and that was the one available. Behind me, the folder sat on the table between them like a third parent. Everything I had wanted for 3 years, gift-wrapped, one signature away. So why did it feel like a scalpel left on a table? The pressure campaign started before I got home. Ryan first, by text. Because paper trails only frighten honest people. Let's be adults. Full repayment. Quiet terms. Signed this week. If the board is never mentioned. Medicine is a small world, Ashley. So is Indiana law. I golf with people you'd recognize. I screenshotted it into my log out of habit and did not reply. Then at 11, a knock at my duplex. And there stood my sister alone in the porch light. I almost didn't recognize her. No lashes, no lipstick, hair scraped back, and I realized I had not seen my sister's bare face since we were teenagers. Maybe nobody had. Take the money, she said. No hello. It's gone anyway. Most of it. The clinic ate it. Take the house. Take the will. I don't care. I'll sign whatever. Her voice was shaking, and her hands were shaking. And none of it, for once, was staged. But the board thing kills him, Ashley. License, clinic, everything. And if he goes down, she laughed. One broken note. What am I? He's all I have. I asked her quietly why she'd done it. Any of it. And my beautiful sister looked at me for a long time out there in the cold and finally told the truth, possibly for the first time since her first pageant. Somebody had to be the pretty one. She said it the way you'd name a diagnosis. You don't know what it's like watching that go. Being seen was the whole job, Ashley. Mom gave you the useful thing. Useful doesn't expire for 1 second. 1 second. I saw the 6-year-old who got applause for existing, and the terror underneath every crown since. She never once said sorry. Not for Ryan. Not for Mom. Not for me. I told her goodnight and I closed the door. And I sat on my kitchen floor with my choice. I didn't sleep, so at 6, I drove to my parents' house and let myself in. And, because it was technically Tuesday, I got out the brush. Mom was up with the birds these days. She sat at the kitchen table in the yellow cardigan, and I worked through her hair section by section while the coffee maker talked to itself, and she hummed something from Before I Existed. And somewhere in there, my hands went quiet. Here's what I understood at that table, and I'll say it plain because it cost me enough to learn. If I took the crown, they were all suddenly offering. Sole heir. Avenging daughter. The sister who won. In the end, I would finally have the thing I'd been starving for since I was 9 years old. And it would prove the scoreboard right. It would just be Bethany's religion, with me on the throne. The whole machine intact. One girl seen, one girl useful, everybody keeping score forever, waiting to chew on whoever came next. My mother never needed a winner. On her worst night, on Highway 7, in one shoe, she wasn't looking for the daughter who won. She was looking for something that felt safe. She kept one fact when everything else went, someone comes on Tuesdays. That's the entire ball game right there. Love that has to be won can be stolen. I'd watched it happen at my own kitchen counter. Love that just shows up has no handle to grab. Mom surfaced for a second, caught my eye in the little mirror and said, Tuesday girl. And I said, "That's me." And finished the braid. At 8:01, I called Eleanor Vance's office. "I know what we're doing," I told her. "All of it. Set the room for Thursday." Thursday, 10 a.m. Eleanor Vance's conference room. Long table. Bad coffee. My father to my left with his hands folded. The two of them across from us, flanked by a Denver attorney who kept glancing at his own phone. I have run codes. I know how to be the calmest person in a room professionally, and I am telling you, I have never needed the skill more. I went down my list like a shift handoff. 1. Repayment. $206,400. The full Serene Steps billings plus both transfers. You'll sign a repayment agreement with a confession of judgment today. Miss one payment, and the judgment files itself. No trial, no discovery, no delays. Sign it, or the civil complaint and the complete criminal referral packet go out tomorrow morning, and you can explain Serene Steps to a jury in a county where everybody's mother knows my mother. The Denver attorney started reading very fast. 2. The estate. I looked at Dad, because this part we had settled at his desk the night before, and he'd listened, and then he'd put his hand over mine for about 4 seconds, which for Arthur Peterson is a wedding toast. The will as drafted leaves everything to me. I've asked him to redraw it. Everything, house, pension, remainder recovered funds, goes into an irrevocable trust for the care of Susan Peterson. Professional trustee, Eleanor Vance supervising. Nobody in this family inherits anything until Mom has everything she'll ever need. No child of this family gets to hold money over another one ever again. Bethany made a small sound. I didn't look up. 3. The trust signs a paid caregiver agreement. Market rate. Taxes withheld. Respite coverage written in. Turns out care coordination is a real job when a real person does it. The first person it pays is Maria. The second one is me. Ryan's attorney whispered. Ryan stared at the confession of judgment, and I watched him run the only math that had ever mattered to him, and come up short. He signed. His pen tore the paper a little. Bethany signed without reading, which was somehow the saddest thing in the room. Then I took out the last document, the one nobody had priced. 4, I said, and set it down facing them. State Medical Board complaint form. Filled out in my handwriting, my name and license number in the complainant box where anyone could read them. 11 Serene Steps invoices had carried supervising physician documentation, visit summaries, oversight notes, a signature I'd been reading on prescriptions for years. Encounters that never happened, attesting to care never rendered on a cognitively impaired patient he hadn't examined since before her diagnosis was 3 years old. This one isn't a negotiation, I said. There's no version where I unsee falsified charts. I've been reporting what I chart for 12 years. I don't stop because the chart has my family in it. The Denver attorney said the word settlement with a question mark, and I slid the form back into its envelope, sealed. It goes in today's mail. I'm not asking permission. I'm giving notice. And my sister came out of her chair. You're doing this to win, she said, and her voice cracked down the middle. And there was the real fight. The only fight we'd ever actually been having since before either of us could spell. You finally get to be the one they pick, and you're going to stand there and pretend it's ethics. Bethany, I said it quietly. And quiet was the one register our family had never used on her, so it landed. I stopped keeping score. She stood there with her mouth open. A woman whose entire operating system had just been handed a sentence it couldn't parse. I'm not going to hate you, I said, and I was surprised to find it wasn't even hard to say. I'm not going to follow your life or tell this town its favorite story about you. And I'm not coming back. Those are all the same decision. I gathered my folder, having gotten lost in one afternoon, both fully, forever. My mother's future funded. The truth on rails. I didn't have to push. And a sister subtracted. A fantasy of applause left on the table with the bad coffee. Nobody claps at the end of a shift. The work is still done. In the hallway, my father was waiting for me, leaning against the wall like a man who had all the time in the world, which is the joke he'd earned. He looked smaller in his coat than he had at the table. The table had been running on borrowed voltage. We stood there while an office copier hummed somewhere, and my father studied me the way he studies things he intends to remember. I'll tell you the thing I got wrong, he said, which from him was practically a sonnet. I thought the folder was the protection. 3 years I kept the record so that when the day came, no one could argue. But sitting in there, he tipped his head at the conference room. I watched you leave the sword on the table when you had every right to swing it and build your mother a fortress out of it instead, and I understood I'd been keeping the wrong ledger the whole time. He put his hand on my shoulder, and his hand had a tremor now, and neither of us mentioned it. They counted what they could take. Your whole life, Ashley, I counted what you carried. Every Tuesday. Every flag you brought me. It's all in the cabinet. Dated. I just never once said it out loud. And that was the error in my chart. I'm not going to describe what my face did in that hallway. Some things aren't for the internet. What I will tell you is what I said, because it surprised us both. I had spent 34 years never asking that man for anything. Being the daughter with no needs was my whole rank and serial number. Teach me the pancakes, I said. Saturday. The ones from when we were little with the bad flip you always blamed on the pan. Well, there's time. My father laughed. Actually laughed, in the hallway of an elder law office. The first time I'd heard it since November. Saturday, he said. Bring your notebook. A surgeon writes everything down. We had 7 more Saturdays. I'm told that's not many. I'm telling you it was a fortune. Here's where it all landed. My mother moved into Oakstone Manor on the 5th, into the room with the oak, and the fund that pays for it every month now has a trustee who answers to nobody's mood at any dinner table. The repayment checks arrive on schedule. Ryan's attorney saw to the wire dates personally, because the alternative files itself at the courthouse, and Ryan has finally met a document he can't charm. My deposit came back to my savings account in the first distribution. Eleanor insisted. Line item 1. The medical board took 11 months, which they tell me is fast. Probation. Practice restrictions. Mandatory supervision. A public order with his name on it that any patient can read online. Not the guillotine. Worse, in a way I didn't design and can't feel bad about. The money people read public orders, too, and the Fountain website quietly became a page that says, "Thank you for your interest." The clinic space is a med spa now.